On this episode of Take Back the Advantage, we are going to have a conversation with Haroon Meer, the founder of Thinkst, and we're going to talk about all things cyber deception. So if you want to learn about cyber deception from one of the industry's leading experts, just keep watching. Deception has been around a long time. It was used extensively during World War II. Winston Churchill, when speaking of the use of dummy naval fleets, said, "Even when the enemy knows we have such a fleet, its presence will tend to mystify and confuse his plans and baffle and distract the enterprise of his submarines. He will always be in doubt as to which is real and which is the dummy fleet." One example of World War II deception, known as Operation Barclay, also included another level of deception called Operation Mincemeat. So in 1943, the invasion of France was more than a year away. The Allies wanted to invade Italy via Sicily. Now, this was an ideal situation, but the Germans knew that as well. So Sicily was going to be very well defended. The Allies also knew that Hitler was very concerned that what he called Fortress Europe could be invaded through the Balkans. There's a lot of natural resources, so an invasion through the Balkans would have crippled the Germans' capability of waging war, in addition to providing a foothold onto the continent of Europe. So they came up with what they referred to as Operation Barclay. They created what they called the 12th Army with 12 fictional divisions, dummy tanks, armored vehicles, all that kind of stuff. Now, to reinforce this, what they were trying to do is get the Germans to reallocate troops from Sicily to Greece. And so to reinforce this, they came up with something called Operation Mincemeat. It was actually created by Sir Ian Fleming, the guy who created James Bond, right? Who in real life was kind of a real life James Bond. So what they ended up doing was they found the body of a homeless drifter who had ended up committing suicide via poison. They created an entire fake persona around this guy. They gave him a new name, Major William Martin. William Martin, because that was a very common name in the British military, and Major, because it was a rank that was high enough to be in possession of sensitive data, but not so high that it would be suspicious the Germans had never heard of this guy before. They gave him pictures of a fake fiancé, fake love letters, identity cards, receipts, bills, all this kind of stuff. And they were trying to set it up so that he was in a plane crash. So they put a life preserver on him, and he, of course, had a briefcase filled with top secret data chained to his wrist. And that briefcase contained some of the plans that reinforced the invasion, or the fictional invasion of Greece. So they dumped this guy off the body in the waters off the coast of Spain after analyzing currents and all that kind of stuff. A couple hours later, he was fished out of the ocean by a Spanish fisherman. Now, Spain was technically neutral, but the dictator of Spain at the time was really leaning towards the Axis powers. So we knew that if the Spanish got their hands on that information, that it would get passed over to the Germans. One detail that I thought was fascinating was, so the Spanish autopsied this person. Now, if they did a thorough autopsy, they would have discovered the poisoning was the cause of the death. So they planted a crucifix on the body, causing the Spanish to believe that this guy was Catholic. And as a Catholic country, the Spanish authorities were reluctant to perform a thorough autopsy. Another thing that they did, because eventually the body was returned to the British, supposedly in a pristine state, untampered with. But the British, in one of the envelopes with sensitive data, they planted a single eyelash. The eyelash was gone. So they knew that that envelope had been opened and then resealed. They even went so far as to put this guy's name on the official casualties list as missing at sea, and they went through a fake effort of trying to recover this guy like they would have done if real top secret data would have been lost. Well, it turned out this mission was a success. The Germans relocated troops from Sicily to Greece. The invasion through Sicily happened, and ultimately, that was some of the first steps in removing the fascist dictator Mussolini from power. Now, that concept of deception highlights a really important concept. So the Central Intelligence Agency, the US CIA, put together what they call the 10 maxims of deception. One of those maxims states great care must be exercised in the design of schemes to leak notional or deceptive plans. Apparent windfalls are subject to close scrutiny and often disbelieved. Genuine leaks often occur under circumstances thought improbable. So the point of this is, if the Allied planners made the discovery of this information too easy, then it's not likely to be believed. But because it was an unusual circumstance, because the body was found in the middle of the ocean, it was absolutely believed. And that's really important when we talk about deception. We can't just give our adversaries information that is too easy or they may not believe it. We've got to make it a little bit hard for them. So it's a really important thing when we think about deception. All right, so a little bit of historical context. I would like to introduce Haroon Meer. He's the founder of Thinkst Applied Research. Those are the folks that bring us the Thinkst Canary. Haroon, would you be kind enough to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. So I was a pen tester. Like I was part of a company called SensePost for about 10 years. And so this was pen testing in the early 2000s, 2000 to 2010, just about. And pretty much what we focused on was just breaking into stuff, building tools, and finding new ways to break into stuff. And so we did a whole bunch of talks and released a whole bunch of tools and papers from 2000 to 2010. The normal Black Hat, DEF CON, like that type of deal. And in 2010 started Thinkst, and in very late 2015 released our first version of Thinkst Canary. And at this point, Canary is pretty widely deployed. Like one of the things that make us happy is that it's on all 7 continents. Literally, we've got canaries in Antarctica.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And more than that, like when we started with canaries in 2015, we thought it was a good idea. Like we gave a talk at Black Hat on why honeypots have been dismissed over the years and why they should come back. But now, like 5 years later, like we know it's not just a good idea. We've got customers, like literally hundreds of customers who've caught attackers and caught red teams around the world. And so pretty much what we do now is Canary and Canary tokens, and we have open source versions of the both. But that's pretty much what we do. And we focus on making canaries really easy to deploy, but allowing people to detect when there's badness on their network. Yeah, so I suspect some of it will come up later in conversation because we focus pretty squarely on using deception for detection. Mm-hmm. Like the main thing that we focus on is knowing when you've been compromised, and using our tools to that end. But yeah, that's us. At this point, we are pretty widely deployed. And the thing that we're most proud of is our products are pretty well loved. Like if you go to canary.tools/love, there's like a list of unsolicited feedback with people just saying, yes, this works. Nice. Which is what we're looking for, something that works.
Absolutely. It's kind of interesting because it seems to be relatively common that people who start up deception companies have this background in pen testing and an attack, which I think is really, really important because I don't see that when I talk about people who found IDS companies. I don't see that when I talk to people who found SIM companies and things like that. But what we're saying is, at least from my perspective, and I do pen testing as well, is, you know, I'll put it this way. When I first started reading and learning and getting involved in deception, I didn't really know what I was looking at. And then I started going, wow, imagine if I was trying to do a pen test against a company doing this stuff. that would suck, right? That would be
Right.
bad. And I think that that offensive knowledge really plays into what deception is all about. So we talked a little bit about military deception,
Right.
and we've jumped into a little bit of a discussion of cyber deception. But how would you like if somebody came up to you and said, "What is this thing called cyber deception? I heard somebody say it. It sounds cool. How would you describe it?"
Yeah, so probably the best way to describe it is that most of the deception, or all of the deception players, are hoping to use the fact that you've got home field advantage when you're defending your network, and you can choose what you show attackers, and because attackers are on your network, figuring things out, you can affect the view of what they have, the expectations of what they have, and leveraged correctly, this can be a really powerful tool that most people don't use. And so deception plays, or most of the deception plays, are how easily you can feed potential attackers bad information, to get them to reveal themselves, or to get them to make themselves busy, or something to your end. So more than anything, like, it's interesting. I suspect as you do more of these, you'll find most of the players say some things exactly the same.
Mhm.
And I think leveraging home field advantage will be the one that comes out with everyone, which is there's a set of tools that defenders have that historically they've not used. And affecting the view of what attackers see ends up being incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, attackers have been using deception against us since,
Right,
well, forever, right? Phishing
right,
is deception, antivirus evasion, application whitelisting evasion, so on and so forth. And
right,
so now we're just finally getting around to, hey, wait a minute, we can do this stuff too.
right.
Now, when I talk to people about deception, I get a comment. And I get this all the time. And it kind of boils down to, Kevin, this sounds all well and good, but we're just talking about honeypots here. We've had honeypots for 3 decades. What's the
Right,
big deal? So, how is this different than what we
right.
did 20 years ago with honeypots?
It's a great question. So I think for the most part, honeypots got a bit of a bad rap. And in part it's because it'll be interesting when you talk to Lance and the folks from the HoneyNet project. I think the HoneyNet guys did great work. Like it was early on, and the Know Your Enemy series was great. Like literally, I used to print them out and learn it, and it had all the luminaries there were, like Fyodor from Nmap and Rainforest Puppy, and everyone who was someone in InfoSec was involved in the Know Your Enemy series. But one of the things that I think was unfortunate is those honeypots ended up being classed almost as a form of hacker anthropology, which is study what attackers do. Like nobody understands this rare animal. Let's put up a honeypot and understand what they do. And so I think that logic kind of ended up making honeypots seem like something of academic interest. Like do this 100 things, and then when you want to study a hacker in his natural habitat, set up a honeypot and observe him. And the natural consequence of that is, well, I don't have time for that. Like I've got a real business to run. Like I don't want to spend my time learning this. And then as defenders got smarter, the argument became, well, actually we can take a class to learn what attackers do. We don't have to spend resources and dedicate time and money to learn what they do. And so I think that whole path ended up being a bad one. And even until fairly recently, if a university student wants a easy master's thesis, set up a few honeypots, and next year set them up and call them SCADA honeypots, and the following year call them VoIP honeypots, and you can do a paper on what your honeypots detected across the world, and you can show a pew pew map and do some stats. And so I think it lends itself very easily to that part of the problem. And I think the baby got thrown out with the bathwater a little bit because people thought it was just for that. But it's got very real uses for defense.
Yeah, I absolutely love that definition. You talked about the hacker anthropology. I always like to say a hacker zoo, right? I
Right.
basically say when we talk about cyber deception versus honeypots,
Right.
it's almost like putting up a hacker roach motel, right? the,
Right.
the concept with honeypots was we're just going to stick this thing somewhere and hope that the bad guys kind of got into it. Where I see some of the differences is that we are putting a lot more focus on design and intent as opposed to
Right.
just having a fake environment. So I know where the attackers are going to go on my network and I know what they're going to do when they get there. So I'm going to place my detective traps exactly where I know the bad guys are going to go. And
Right.
whether that's like you talked about, like canary tokens on production systems, or whether you're
Right.
talking about like a canary appliance that
Right.
pretends that it's a database or an IoT system or whatever. I think that the difference is not so much in the technology,
Right.
although there are definite differences, but it's in the intent and the design as to what's going on, which I think is super, super important.
Yeah, I'll tell you one place where I think we differ a fair bit. I, I and this is a tough one for me, but it completely flies in the face of popular deception vendor opinions. But I think the industry over indexes on really great deception stories. And like I say, I know it's an uncommon thought because I know that lots of people are doing very clever stuff around it, and people are using machine learning to make your systems look good. But I'll tell you from my and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on it from experiences pen testing. One of the stories that I commonly talk about that explains this well. So for years, for about 10 years, we gave training at Black Hat on how to break into networks from the internet. And we had several principles that we teach. And one of the things that we used to teach for years was if you break onto a network, and so now stage two begins, right? Your lateral movement's going to start. We always taught people that, look, like while you're mapping out this network, like if you're looking for a quick kill, if the network's full of Windows hosts and you see a lone Solaris box, go for that Solaris box. Because chances are this network has figured out how to do Windows admin, but they had to get this Solaris box to manage their disk array or to manage their telephony. And every attacker who's broken into a bunch of networks knows it's the odd misshapen box in the corner that happened to have LDAP creds because it was set up once in a pinch and then became production. But if you look at the hidden information behind that, what I'm actually saying is the box that doesn't fit in is worth taking as an attacker. And so now, if you look at those two pictures in context, it's not just the box that really fits in really well and matches a story. We were literally teaching people, go for the box that doesn't fit in and doesn't match the story. And this is not something we knew when we started Canary. So like everyone else, we built the technology so that it's a complete good copy. And like if you tell a Canary device to be a Cisco, its TCP/IP stack is a Cisco. And if you tell it to be a Windows box, its stack is a Windows box, and it can be enrolled in AD and all of that. But my actual point is, even if it didn't, it would still work. Because when you Snowden and you going from Windows share to Windows share stealing docs, you don't go, oh, wait, this share is actually SMB on Linux. That's odd. You're there to pillage, and that's what you do. And so I think we do ourselves a bit of a disservice by over-indexing on the other component, because it makes people think it's harder than it is. So someone goes, ooh, now I've got to come up with this great story, and now I've got to make sure I've done all these prerequisites, and I can't do this until I've done all this work. When in actual fact, drop down a fake Windows share quickly enough, and empirically we know it's going to catch people. Like, like it just doesn't need all that work. And you can do all that work and you'll start getting different types of catches.
Mhm.
But mostly I think it doesn't need it.
Yeah. And I will tell you, I think you might be surprised. I agree with you 100%.
Right.
Sort of. And
Right.
I have a few caveats, right? So I actually
Sure.
agree 100% with what you're saying. And I kind of dumb it down to saying bad guys today are not expecting deception. So
Right.
we can do terrible deception
Right.
and still win, right?
Right.
It can be, I mean, literally that tech segment that I did a couple weeks ago with Tony from Ativo was how to use Netcat as a
Right.
deception, right? It can be just as simple and basic as possible. That's today.
Right.
Now, I can envision a point in time in the future when this becomes much more mainstream, that the
Right.
bad guys become more suspicious. They become more careful.
Right.
And the good news is that, we already have the answer for that. We just don't need it today. And the answer for
Right.
that is the deception story, right?
Right.
We know we can create very robust, very amazing deception stories. We don't need to right now.
Right.
But what we can do is easily adapt the technology that, let's face it, has largely been around for 30 years
Right.
with concepts that have been around for 3,000 years.
Right.
And we can stay ahead of the bad guys. So I actually agree 100% that right now, today, deception doesn't need to be complicated.
Right.
And let's face it, in the future, the technology is not likely to be complicated. It's
Right.
the concepts that you wrap around it. And again, going to your point, when I talk to people about deception, I had an interview last week with Wade Lance from Elusive Networks. And one of the things that we talked about is in terms of kind of the story and all that kind of stuff is, again, going on those same lines. We don't have to create this amazing story today, but we can and will be able to do so in the future, which is an awesome, awesome thing. So
Right.
let me ask you this. You had talked about your focus is on detection. Okay. And
Right.
you also mentioned Lance Spitzner. I was talking to Lance a couple months back, and he kind of laid out this cool little triangle where he said, here are the potential benefits of deception. And at the base of the triangle, and he said, this is the 80% mature part of it, is detection, right?
Right.
Then as you move up the triangle, the 15% mature portion is threat attribution and or attack attribution and threat intelligence. And
Right.
then the peak of it, the 5% mature part, is active attacker engagement. That's when we're
Right.
actively involving and reacting and adjusting to the attacker and all that. But I
Right.
think that the one of the big points that Lance said is when we talk cyber deception, I'm going to kind of dumb it down and see if you like my definition.
Sure.
Historically, we've done a very bad job with detecting attacks, in most cases because attacks, our detection technology is focused on looking for some sort of signature of evil.
Right.
And it's really easy for bad guys to make evil look like not evil, right?
Right.
So what we're doing is changing the game, and we're saying instead of looking for evil, we're going to look for abnormal. Now, that said, trying to normalize a network is very challenging. Ask anybody who's tried to deploy like user and entity behavioral analytics technologies.
Right.
It's really hard. So what we're
Right.
basically doing is we're taking resources that have no other business value, and therefore normal is defined as nobody interacts with this. And
Right.
therefore, the second that somebody interacts with it, it is actionable.
Right.
Could it be a false positive? Absolutely. But is it going to be really easy to identify that false positive? Yeah, it is, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this technology is, and I've said it in every interview, I think this is the technology that changes our industry forever.
Right.
I couldn't be more passionate about this, and everybody that I've talked to that's involved with this feels the same way. But let's
Right.
talk about the bad. What do you think are the biggest obstacles getting in the way of a more universal deployment of deception technologies?
Yeah, it's a good question. So from our side, and it largely shapes the way we've aimed at the problem. I think there's a few big things that we've tried to address in our approach. The one is, I think no matter how good a potential solution is, complexity is a killer. And so I think that any solution that offers great good, but with great complexity behind it, I don't think most networks are able to absorb that extra complexity. Like the problem we need to be resolving in InfoSec right now in most spaces is complexity, which ends up being a killer. And so I think a solution that adds complexity doesn't end up helping much. So if a deception solution comes along and I need to train my engineers to become certified XYZ engineers, like, I think you've already caused more of a problem than you've solved. And I think if deploying it requires great thinking from great engineers to start eking out value, you've already lost, because you've not got that added that benefit cheaply enough. So I think complexity is one, and then I think a second one that's dangerous for people is how to do this without adding to the organization's attack surface. And it's kind of interesting because historically, when honeypots got a bad rap, one was, I don't want to spend my time analyzing attackers. And the other was this really weird thread that happened where people used to worry about, is this entrapment? Will I have legal problems? And for the most part, like I don't think that was ever a real problem. Like I think everyone worried about it, but it was premature optimization. But having said that, I look at a bunch of solutions in the marketplace, not just deception solutions, and I look at their deployment, and I'm terrified that when those solutions are popular enough, they actually going to get targeted themselves and become a bigger part of the problem than they are a solution. Because if you're dropping stuff that's spanning VLANs or sitting in DMZs or has access to your cloud credentials, like, you need to be pretty sure that that stuff's not yelling YOLO with your credentials. And so I think, yeah, if I had to list the two things, I think complexity is a problem, and I think inherent product security is another problem that most of the vendors are going to have to kind of find a way to put organizations' minds at ease, because without those two things, I think it's more dangerous to go down that path, and then you just move on. And InfoSec is a never-ending stream of squirrels to distract you. So you hear the thing, it's a good idea. Ooh, but we need to check this. Ooh, look, squirrel. And the organization goes off in another direction. So I think we need to make sure we've got those two nailed before the technology gets serious traction.
Excellent. Yeah, I do tend to agree. I mean, some of the technologies that I've seen do have this like span VLANs. You hook them up to trunk ports and things like that. And there are definite advantages to doing some of those things. But at the same point in time, to your point, the more complex a solution is, the more potential points of failure there are. It's interesting as I talk to different folks involved in deception, right? And we're all doing the same basic things conceptually, but the ways in which different organizations are going about doing it is so vastly different. Right. 2 weeks ago, or a while ago, I talked to Tony from Ativo, and they've got a way of doing their things. I talked to Wade from Elusive, and their approach is very, very, very different from the Ativo approach. And I'll give you some chance to talk about more your technology, but your approach is also very, very different. And I think that's so awesome because it means that different organizations with different pain points, different skill sets, different capabilities can find a solution. So what happens if, so somebody's watching this and they're going, you know what? I've watched a couple of these videos. I love this deception thing. I tried talking to my boss about it. And my boss is like, I don't know what you're talking about. Go do your job. Go figure something, I don't have time for this. How would you tell somebody to have the discussion with their boss? How would you tell somebody to convince their boss to give deception a try?
Yeah, it's a super good question. For the most part, for us, and I'll tell you how we currently do it. Like our current pitch, and when we started Canary, was like literally my pitch to people was, it's going to cost you under 10K and 5 minutes to set up. Why wouldn't you try this? And literally my opening pitch to people was, listen, 10K, 5 minutes. What's the worst that'll happen? Like at worst, we suck. And we got pretty lucky because pretty early on, some really big Silicon Valley companies used us and then publicly said good things about us when they caught attackers. And so then we could go out and say, hey, like 10K, 5 minutes of your time, and the CISO of Slack said we don't suck. Like, why wouldn't you try us? Or like the smart folks, like this famous pen tester said that it caught him. Like, why wouldn't you try us? And so our pitch mostly, and we've had to organize the product around that, right? And organize the pricing around that, is to give people a really low impact way to try it. So we totally understand that, like, for you to convince your boss and do a 100K or do a POC that's going to last 4 months, like, he's got other channels. But saying to someone, hey, like 5K, 5 minutes, try this. And if, like, generally you'd be able to make that call 5K and 5 minutes later because it's pretty obvious and pretty in your face. And so we've aimed our whole pitch at that, which is try this. And from there, people then essentially just grow their flocks and get more and more into it.
And that's one of the things in the conversations that I've had with folks from Thinkst is the cost, the entry point, right? If you're a really small organization, right, you're just a little tiny organization, being able to have a price point that most people can put on their credit card without needing to get a lot of approval, right? And having seen some of the technology and being able to spin up different devices in literally seconds, right? We're not talking about, I can take a fake Windows computer and turn it to an IoT device in a minute, right? So I think that's a really cool place to be, which is, look, we're not trying to, we're not trying to go out and make the $1 million deal with some gigantic, get it in place, try it. Because let's face it, if somebody throws a single deception appliance out there and it's the thing that catches the bad guy the day after they get on the network, that is a win like no other.
And that's literally been our business model, right? So we go with that entry point, and then we've got, like at this point, we've got a single customer with canaries on almost every government network they have. And so you're talking about an entire country running literally hundreds and hundreds of canaries. And that goes from exactly the same path, which goes, you start with 5, you see that it works, you go, oh, okay, we can totally put this on our external branches, and you've got 40. And then you go, you know what, this would work with a countrywide deployment. And then you, next thing you know, you've got a few hundred. But yeah, it's other than being good for business, I think InfoSec has been full of grudge purchases for too long. And so I think InfoSec has kind of gotten used to, we'll pressure you into buying this, and now you've bought it, and now you have it deployed, and now your staff have training on it, so you're never going to remove us. And our model kind of pushes for try us, and if we don't suck, buy a little more. And the day we start sucking, don't renew. And I think that ends up building a kind of trust with the customer, and it forces us to be honest, right? Like literally, if we sit on our laurels and stop adding value, the customers don't renew. And like currently, we pretty happy that we've got a ridiculously low churn rate. So customers who've been with us have been with us for 4 and 5 years. But if we start sucking, they'll stop, and it forces us to not suck. So I think it's a kind of a positive loop that the industry needs more of. Like I think we've kind of ended up building terrible products because the industry tolerated it. So we were allowed to have terrible products because people had to buy us anyway. And we hoping that we can be part of that change.
So how about this? So somebody decides this deception stuff, I want to do it. This is going to be awesome. Now, I can tell you from experience, I know that deception can be deployed in any organization that I've come across, right? It doesn't matter the size, the budget. And what I've also seen is that the difficulty of deploying deception tends to scale in line with the complexity environment. So if you're a small organization with a small budget, you're going to be able to do it. If you're a gigantic organization with a 1,000-person security team, you're going to be able to do it. That said, I got to believe that there are going to be some things that if you've done them ahead of time, there are some things that are going to benefit as preparation before you deploy deception. Not a must do, but what are some of the things that you would tell a client before you go and do deception? It might be a good idea to do the following things.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing, like the one thing that I'd like to say is organizations need to understand where their crown jewels are and what matters to them. You could certainly deploy canaries without knowing that, but you'd have to deploy more of them because you scattershotting it and hope you pick up stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have a decent understanding, if you are a national broadcaster or massive broadcaster, and you know that actually you care about your investigative unit and you really care about broadcast and you really care about this admin segment, then that's cool. Like what you're looking at is drop some canaries here, drop some there, drop some canary tokens there. So a good understanding of what matters to you will help you deploy. But again, and like one of the things that's been really useful, and lots of it is accidental, like we didn't plan this ahead of time, we kind of got lucky with it. One of the advantages with our really easy, really low cost approach is if you were a CISO and you walked into an org in week one, and if you've ever been in this situation, and a few of the people in the org at Thinkst have, one of the problems you have if you've just walked into a new org is everywhere you scratch is just another festering wound. Like you're in this org and everyone thinks that the problem is the DMZ. And then you find out that all the hosts on the internal network are connected to the server segment. And like literally everywhere you go, there's just a mountain of new problems. If you did nothing else at that point, and there's always a few things, like people will make a case for get asset management done or get inventorying done. Like one of the honest first things that I'd say, and in part to Canary's backstory, it's where it came from. I'd say, go get 20 canaries and drop them. Like do nothing else. Like it's day 2. You don't know anything else. Go drop 20 canaries. And in part, it's because there's such low noise that these canaries are going to sit out there. And if you find out that, hey, the canary in broadcast is getting pinged every 5 minutes, that's something you probably want to think about. Or if you find out that this canary that you dropped on this network that nobody should be on is now getting people probing it for open shares. And so there's kind of a prevailing thought or you hear this thought sometimes from people that go, oh, first I need to do this thing. And of course it's, I'm biased because Canary is ours, but the reason it's ours, like the reason we built this, of all the things we can build, is I deeply believe that if you're in that situation, making decisions, you almost making decisions blind. And most other products have such a long time to pay off that even if they're the right decision, you're going to be really far down the line before you get this benefit. So if you day one with a CISO, and if your idea is, I'm going to do asset inventory, at best, you're going to get useful results in a few months. And during those few months, you're going to get taken to the cleaners if there's people already on your inside doing badness. But if genuinely you can drop canaries in today's lunch break, then drop them, because what you learn, you'd rather know than not know. And so literally, honestly, my advice is drop canaries on day one. And you'll see why it goes to my thing that says, I don't want to push people for complex deception story, because literally I'm saying to them, don't think about this. Take them and literally today just drop them in 20 places and forget about them. And then start your other projects, start your asset inventorying, start your other stuff. But if this chirps, you want to know about it, and take it from there. So for me, it's literally my day one suggestion. And we've got customers now who are incident response companies. And literally when they go in to do IR, they drop canaries on the network. Because even when they go home, what they want to know is there activity on the network that they want to know about? So as long as you can get deployment down to nothing, that starts to be reasonable at play, which is just drop them and the rest will work itself out.
It's kind of funny because you bring this up, and everything you just said to me makes 100% sense. It's not shocking. It's nothing. It's just like, yeah, that seems like it makes sense. But then we got to realize what you just said, when you look at it from the perspective of most people in IT and security, you just said something that is more shocking than they've ever heard before, which is, wait a minute, we've been dealing with bad guys hacking into us for 30 to 40 years. We do a terrible job of detecting the bad guys. We spend gigantic sums of money and resources and time tuning our IDSs and our SIMs and deploying all this stuff. And what you're saying is, I can take an inexpensive piece of hardware, drop it on my network, pay almost no attention to it whatsoever, and instantly I start detecting attackers from all across my network, and it's easy. And that's heresy, dude. That's crazy talk.
Yeah,
right. I'll be honest. When I first started, and I've said this before, when I first started getting involved in deception, I couldn't figure out what I was missing. And in the context of, it can't be this easy or this effective. And it took me a good 9 months to realize I wasn't missing anything. It is this easy, and it is this effective. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Early on, our biggest, I wouldn't say detractors, but the biggest doubt we had was from people saying that, like surely it can't be this easy. Like every vendor says their stuff is easy, and you still see it. Like we've got miles in the industry, right? And you'd say to people like, day one, drop it. It's going to be low impact. And the problem is, vendors have been spouting this kind of stuff for so long that there's an automatic knee-jerk reaction where people go, every vendor says that, and what about the cost of ownership, or what about this? And specifically in our case, like we've built Canary for exactly that. So when you drop your canaries, it's zero admin. Like never think about it again. Like don't log on to the console ever again. We don't care. Like when you get your alert, it'll mail you or SMS you or go to your SIM. And I think like we got lucky, like I said, because early on, like really well-known security people used it and then publicly said like, hey, actually this stuff worked for us. And so it knocked away some of that. Like we don't have to say, hey, trust me. We go, hey, listen to this dude, or hey, look at what that guy said. But yeah, it is almost there is almost a moment of, but it can't be. For us so far, it's I don't feel like I've heard some of the other vendors, deception vendors talking, and our take on it is pretty much don't trust us. Like A, try it, or B, listen to all these other folks, and you'll see what they say. But yeah, it's pretty great.
I mean, you think about the industry of attack detection, right? Which is effectively where we are, right? In this industry of attack detection, the overwhelming majority of historic sales pitches was, look at all the alerts we can generate. Right? We can generate 1 million alerts in an hour, or whatever the thing boils down to. The very first demo of a deception technology that I ever saw, when they got to the alert dashboard, they said, you should never see anything on this dashboard. It should be empty. And that was shocking, right?
Exactly right. And to that end, like a few RSAs ago, we met with a customer, and this customer's got over 100 canaries distributed, and the CISO was there, and he brought his CTO, and the CTO tells us, I get canary alerts on my phone. And like, we didn't quite get what he meant, but he's like, we've had you guys for 2 years and you've gone off 4 times. He says, and 2 were penetration tests, and 2 were, he said, unofficial penetration tests, which means and he's like, so when canaries go off, I want to know about it with the engineers. And literally, well-deployed canaries, well-deployed deception should be that. It's just no alert until it matters. And when it matters, cancel your weekend plans.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't think that I've had a conversation where we've said so many matter-of-fact things that are just shocking, industry changing, right? This is, it is something entirely different. Now, I will say one of the reasons why I put this YouTube channel and everything together was in talking with lots and lots of deception vendors and people involved in deception. What I've found is that deception vendors spend as much, if not more time, trying to convince people that deception is a good idea. And that means they're not spending time talking about what differentiates their product from the competition, right? If I got to sell people on the concept of deception, I don't have the time or the energy to be able to talk about why my solution is better than somebody else's. So here's your opportunity. What would you say? So, what differentiates, and you've kind of alluded to a lot of this. So I'm gonna get ahead of you for a second. What I'm taking from all this is that in large part, the focus that you guys have is on simple, easy, and inexpensive. Okay. Aside from those, what are some of the things that you would say differentiate you from the competition?
Yeah. So I'd go again for simple, just because there's a part of simple that's incredibly difficult, and we spend stupid amounts of time making simple work, like to get a simple deployment, and early on its own, that's kind of deceptive. But like, you drop a canary down, like I said before, like down to the stack level, down to the service, down to all of that, it's completely fooling you. But to you, it was just a boot and one click. And way down to the fact that, like, one of the things that our canaries do is when your canary talks to its console, it's talking encrypted, but via DNS. And essentially what this means is, even on complex networks, you're not making holes for management traffic to go through. As long as valid DNS traverses your network, not even like Canary 53 out, like it can follow your internal resolver chain and find its way out. And and the reason for all that effort, again, is because you shouldn't have to drop a canary and then have to contact the firewall folks to open up holes or contact the routing. And so we focus crazily on, are we adding to people's overhead, or can they just drop us and work? And we do like an entire set of our work is on that, which is dropping this should be painless. And then the other place that I think we're fairly unique on is we spend stupid amounts of time to make sure we don't open up people's attack surface. And so we've blogged a bunch on stuff we do that's different. And like there's simple stuff like the way we put stuff together. But for example, a little while back, we had NCC do an assessment of our stuff, and Ollie Whitehouse made a comment that it's rare to find a security device that's also a secure device. But I think security products have a terrible history with insecure products, right? Like a few years back in the Veracode report, we came second last only to CMSs. Like security software introduced more security bugs on customer networks than anything else. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that we're not that. And then the last thing that I'd say is fairly unique about us is we do a lot of research into what I'd call, and you see some of it coming through with our work in Canary tokens, in almost the next stage of painless deception. And as a company, we share all that stuff, right? So the moment we build a certain type of token, we'll give it to the world and tell people how we use it. And it's a little bit odd. So for example, if you look at our Canary token stuff, our customers get Canary tokens as part of Canary, but we give it away free at canarytokens.org. And like the canarytokens.org service, like that Docker image has been downloaded tens of thousands of times. And the one we host is used hundreds of thousands of times. And we give it away free. And in part, we do that because genuinely the stuff should be useful to everyone. And when we do that, we also give away, like we don't do this thing where we save our best tokens for our paid customers. Like in December last year, we found this way to hack Slack API tokens so that now you can sprinkle Slack API tokens on your dev machines. And the moment an attacker finds one, he thinks, cool, I get access to these people's Slack. And the moment he uses it, you get an alert. And we give that away. And we tell people how we're doing it. And so on the one hand, competitors can steal it. But for the most part, we think there's a greater good because more people get to use it. And yeah, for the most part, that's us.
I can tell you that the Canary token stuff, I've played around with it. It might very well be included or referenced in an upcoming SANS class on cyber deception, which I'm currently writing. But that's some really cool stuff. I particularly want to go back. Did you just say that you basically stole the concept of DNS cat to do your command and control between your token? I love that. I think that's so awesome. Is that you guys have said, hey, you know what? We're going to use what is arguably an attacker covert command and control structure, embedding commands in DNS packets, and use that for our command and control structure because DNS is allowed outbound, so nobody needs to touch a firewall. That is, I love it. I love it.
So I'll tell you something interesting. So I'm doing a quick check for when DNS cat was released. Do you know when it was first released?
I have no idea.
So we're not the first to think of it, but it in part it covers part of our hacksaw pedigree. Back in 2002 or 2003, I first posted to one of the mail lists on how you could use DNS when doing SQL injection. Essentially so you've now got SQL injection going. Effectively, a command is running on a SQL server somewhere, and I posted a string that you could pass to SQL Server that would run a command, and then for each result, look it up on DNS so that your results would come back out through DNS.
Yeah.
And then in 2000 and something, we gave a Black Hat talk where we made that a robust tool called Squeezer, so that now if you're doing DNS SQL injection, you could use it as a full comms channel, effectively even passing binaries through this DNS interface. And literally when we built Canary, we took that comms channel, and that's how canaries communicate now. And of course we add encryption on top of it. And but again, we think there's a bunch of hacker tricks like that. So for example, I'll give you one other that's just cute. When you first register a hardware canary, so you've got a device that's on your network, but maybe your network is this crazy unrouted network, and normally you'd have to battle network routes to set it up and open holes. And literally what we do behind the scenes is this hardware device generates a pair of crypto keys, and we now need to get that key to the server, but you might not be on a routed network yet. And literally what we tell you to do is we say, okay, keep your console, a tab open to the console, and then you're configuring this thing in a tab. And literally when it creates those crypto keys, it XSRFs you from one tab to the other to pass that crypto key to the server. And then the server grabs the key, and now the server can decrypt this DNS traffic. And all of this is hidden, right? So users never know that this is happening.
And I just want to be real clear for those people who may not live in the world of web application penetration testing. You basically said we're using a vulnerability called cross-site request forgery, which involves I'm a victim. I'm logged in with credentials to a web application. Well, if somebody gets me to process a transaction, that will automatically use my credentials already logged into that site. So basically, I log into site A, I'm connected up to site B. We're going to run some code from site B that's going to use my leverage, my access to site A to run a transaction. That's an attack. That's what bad guys do to try to take over sites. And what you guys are going to say, hey, we're using it. Yeah, and I think that's so much fun, is that we get to hack back in a way, right? We're not hacking the bad guys in any kind of way that would be illegal, but what we are doing is using what the bad guys have used against us forever, and we're using it against them. Hacker techniques and deception hand in hand. That's awesome. That's
Thanks.
fantastic.
It's where we spend our time, and we think that there's value in that because we can make things simpler, and because we can make our detections better. And that stuff's kind of sprinkled through everything we do.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I know we're getting a little late, and I know it's past midnight where you are, so I appreciate you staying up late and all that kind of stuff. I've really enjoyed this. It's been an awesome conversation.
That's cool.
Any parting thoughts, or if people are interested, where can they go to learn more about Thinkst?
Sure. So follow us on Twitter. We are at Thinkst Canary. On the web, we are at canary.tools, which is an odd domain. But yeah, visit us, shout out any questions you have. We'd be happy to chat.
And I will put links to all that stuff in the show notes. So I'll make sure that everybody can go there. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap things up for now. If the folks watching this, if you enjoyed this content and want to get more, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you click the little bell thing that's kind of next to the subscribe so you get notified when new content gets released. Don't forget to click the little thumbs up like thing if you did like this. Please comment, right? If there's anything you want to hear about, if you have questions, if there's anybody who you want me to talk to, whatever, on this channel, definitely leave some comments as well. If you know anybody else who may benefit from knowledge of cyber deception, you want to get somebody involved in this field, please make sure that you share the information about this channel so that together we can take back the advantage.